All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. My name is Dave, and we're going to put this video all over the place, various platforms. So I don't want to just say it's one channel or another channel, but radical independent fans and other places you guys will see myself and Charles Anderson, who comes to us from the great state of South Carolina, also host of the Lone Wolf Ace podcast. Charles, how are you, sir?
Doing very well. As I told Dave before we started recording here, I'm going to apologize if there's an echoey audio today. Unfortunately, my laptop decided to play an April Fool's joke on me and die.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm joining in by phone today. I'm just using a little Bluetooth earphone over here. So that's where the audio is coming from. So if it's not the best, I do apologize. But we've got something to talk about today, Dave. The breaking news coming out from this week. I think this is going to be an interesting conversation, man.
Yeah, well, the Trump indictment, right? The end of the
Yeah.
world. The Trump people are going crazy. This is a constitutional crisis. All kinds of different things, and both the left and the right, Charles, on this are responding, I think, in a way that, for me, as somebody who really want and hear me out, Trumpers, okay? Because I voted for Trump, right? But hear me out. We need to fix the stuff that's wrong with the country. All right. And I don't really care who is the guy or woman who ends up being the presidential nominee. I care, but what I'm saying is I need someone to get serious and get involved and start mapping out what they want to do. Right. And so I look at this, the right, they're all apoplectic, and they should be to some. I think there's some merit in this whole witch hunt thing, or however you want to describe what they're doing to Trump, because why didn't they do this in 2016? 7 years ago, they had the Stormy Daniels stuff was out there. And if they wanted to, and his opponents too, Charles, in the primary, could have hit him over the head with this stuff. You had Team Jeb Bush and Team John Kasich and whoever else out there. They could have hammered him on this, but they didn't for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. I guess it's because everyone has some skeletons that you could probably unearth. And then you've got the war of, sensationalism, where we're trying to find out who did what. And meanwhile, again, Charles, my original point, you got train derailments all over the place. You got rampant inflation. You've got a culture war, I think, which really kicked into higher gear this week with the Tennessee shooting. And you've got endless war, right? You've got the war in Ukraine. The media's kind of gone a little silent on the war in Ukraine because I don't think it's going the way that they had advertised, where we're sending all the money to Ukraine and the weapons and the tanks, we send the Abrams tanks and all this stuff. And yeah, we're going to win now, right? That's not the way it's going on the ground over there. And nobody is really talking about that other than alternative media sources. So, Charles, What say you, brother? We've got a lot there. I'm handing it off to you. And what's your take on all this?
Well, first and foremost, the Stormy Daniels thing was going on for a while. They didn't try to get him into court and go after him legally. But then again, there was always that floating thing about could you prosecute a sitting president? I remember hearing that a lot when Trump was in office, when they tried to, go after him on the January 6th or the Russia collusion, whatever. When he was still in office, I remember on the news networks, there was the debate on could you actually charge him criminally as long as he was the sitting president. That the Constitution wasn't very clear on that. Now, as far as the constitutional crisis thing about him being charged and being a former president, and it's never been done before. So the argument could be made, yeah, it's never been done before, but in many cases it probably should have before now. But let's be honest. I don't think that the Stormy Daniels thing is the ideal situation in which we should have finally prosecuted a former president. We didn't go after Bush for what took place in Iraq. Yeah. Okay. We didn't go after Bush for lying, for getting us into a war, for literally breaking international law, torturing people. Uh, there's been a lot of things that have taken place that we didn't prosecute presidents for. We didn't prosecute Barack Obama for allowing things like double taps to take place, things
Yeah.
that Snowden and Chelsea Manning have came out and revealed. We didn't prosecute any of these former presidents, but we're going to prosecute Trump because he gave hush money to Stormy Daniels. Now, there's two sides to the argument. First of all, Trump denied that he ever actually had an affair with Stormy Daniels. Stormy Daniels got an attorney, sued Donald Trump for defamation. We all remember the grand Michael Avenatti.
Yeah.
Okay. This was her wonderful attorney. He was all over the place: CNN, MSNBC, CBS News, the Bill Maher. He's all over the place, right? And then what came of that? The guy turned out to be a complete sleazebag. He got sued, I believe, about three other things, lost some court cases. Stormy Daniels and him have a nasty falling out. And then she came out and said he basically tried to use her or whatever. But needless to say, she lost her battle with Donald Trump in court. Okay. She
Mm-hmm.
did not win that case. And so the other argument is it's very common for people in high positions to just pay people off to shut them up to avoid the bad press.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily an admission of guilt. It's just a we don't want to deal with the negative repercussions of what could come from this. Could they be guilty? Possibly. Maybe they're innocent. They just don't want to deal with the backlash because you're running for office. You're a very important business person. This thing happens a lot. By the way, Bill Clinton had to pay off a few women.
Yeah. That's
Let's
true.
go back to the 90s.
Yeah.
Okay. Bill Clinton had some hush money. Okay. For that matter, Hillary Clinton violated campaign finance thing, arguably, when the Clinton campaign used money to get the Steele dossier.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
There
Right.
are no charges being brought up towards any of these people. Why? And of all the things, you're going after this for Donald Trump. You didn't get him on the emoluments clause.
No.
And that was the one everybody tried to say they should go after him on.
No.
So, somebody me and you have listened to a lot over the years. Former Governor Jesse Ventura, follow the money. Okay. Think about it in terms of this. Okay. They're going to pretend that the 90s are so long ago that you forget about Bill Clinton and his escapades. Okay. And the reason they're not going to try to hit Trump on something like the emoluments clause are because they're all a bunch of crooks anyway. This same emoluments clause that ties to the president really should tie to every sitting member of Congress in the United States Senate, but it does not. They all have special interests. They get involved in politics. They put their money where it's going to go to work for them. And that's why they come out way richer than they should have been based on the salary they were supposed to get from that office. Okay. So they're not going to go after that because, well, that's, kind of potentially going to raise a question about them too. So the people who don't like Donald Trump don't want him to run again. And it's my take on it is this, and some Trumpers may disagree with me. It's not so much that he is this true outsider. I think the first 4 years he was in office showed he wasn't the outsider he pitched himself to be. He played along with the Mitch McConnells and so on and so forth a lot when he was the president. But he was just enough of an outsider with a big enough mouth to say the quiet part out loud to
Yeah.
the point that they did not like that. You're revealing things that we don't like. You're saying the quiet part out loud, sir. You're revealing our hand. They don't like that. They think he's too much of a loose cannon and they don't know what he's going to do. So realistically, Republicans and Democrats want Trump to go away. Okay. I said that with the 2020 election business. I said, there, regardless of whether something took place or not, the core of the Republican Party is not going to get behind this because they want him gone. They would probably rather have Joe Biden as the president than Donald Trump.
Yep.
Okay. They may disagree with Joe Biden on a lot of things, but Joe Biden plays the same sleazy game that the rest of these politicians play. Okay. That's why they get along so well. That's why their version of bipartisanship is not the two parties coming together to work for the good of the country. It is the two parties coming together to do what's best for the parties and the donors.
Yeah.
And the people always fall on the wayside. It's happened countless times over the last few decades. But in the case of Trump, now he's just said he's running for president again. So, like, okay, we've got to try to do something to stop this guy. And they come up with this. And I don't know. I'm curious what your take on this is. My opinion, there's two ways I come at this. First of all, they're either trying so desperately to stop him that they're just grabbing at whatever. And I think if that's the case, it's going to drastically backfire on him because I do not see this being the bullet to finally put him down, theoretically speaking, of course.
Yes.
This, I believe, is only going to bolster his campaign with the base. They're going to look at this the same way I just described, as you've had all these other things in the past and you've never prosecuted. And the argument that this district attorney is making is that by giving this hush money payment and keeping this thing silent, he then helped his campaign. But the same could be said for people intervening on the Hunter Biden laptop story for the Biden campaign, for Bill Clinton giving his hush money payments for the Clinton campaign and the dossier. You could make these arguments for every single one of these things, okay? But they've never done anything about it. So why now? It's obvious that you are just a dog with a bone and you don't want to let go of Donald Trump. You want to do whatever to stop him from becoming president again, which, if you want to talk about attacking our democracy, I would say that's a pretty good attack. You're obviously very double standard in your argument here. But I've got another theory, and I'm not sure which one I believe more. I'm kind of 50-50 on these. There's a part of me, Dave, that thinks this is more my conspiracy theory side here. What if this is a plan by these Democrats and this New York district attorney to bolster Trump enough, as if he isn't already the front runner, to possibly guarantee he win the Republican primary, with the idea that he can win a primary, but he can't win a general election? I wonder about that because there are, now DeSantis has gone down.
I know where you're going with this. Go ahead, keep going.
DeSantis has gone down some in the polls, but most people believe that if, say, Ron DeSantis were to become the Republican nominee, he would absolutely wipe the floor with Joe Biden.
Yeah, I think he would.
But people are not so sold that Trump would.
Correct.
Yet he's still slightly ahead in the Republican primary. So by coming out with such a ridiculous indictment, that if you just look at the merits alone, it's absolutely laughable considering historical precedent here. Let's do this just to rile up his base, make him look like the martyr, get him past the primary, and then we'll beat him in the general election. Ironically enough, similar to what they did in 2016, but that backfired on them. So, but what is your take on that?
No, I mean, I like your second theory a lot because DeSantis, was favored for a little bit, and then Trump did a couple of rallies. I think he went to CPAC. He really disciplined his message for a few weeks, which was strange for him, but someone finally probably said, dude, you can't just, shoot from the hip so hard all the time. You gotta rein it in. And he threw out some new proposals. He's still unrepentant on a couple of big things like the COVID situation, where he for whatever reason, if you read anything by Donald Trump, you're going to find out that admitting you're wrong is a weakness and it's not
Correct.
part of the art of the deal and all this stuff. And again, a lot of people looking at foreign policy. Is Ron DeSantis a hawk? You know, he came out and said some really good things initially,
Right.
said that, hey, this is a regional conflict over in Ukraine and those people, you know, they need to work it out over there. And then someone got to him, which is really
Hmm.
sad. And then he came back and basically recanted the whole thing and said, oh, yeah, we got to be tough. And, you know, it basically
Yeah.
laying out the George W. Bush foreign policy, maybe not to that extreme, but
Right.
certainly there are rumors, Charles, that our old friend Karl Rove might be working with Ron DeSantis, and if that's the case, you know, I would consider voting for DeSantis if it was a DeSantis versus Biden or whoever. I would consider, yeah, he's done a pretty good job here in the state of Florida. I'm not unhappy. In fact, I'd rather him just stay here and just keep the state open and free and do the things that he's been doing here on the state level. But as far as your idea, see, Trump really struggles with suburban women. And
Hmm.
those numbers really haven't changed. This is why you
No.
had was it Glenn Youngkin in Virginia? Wasn't really a Trumpster candidate, but said,
Hmm.
hey, talking to the moms there, hey, we believe in your right to parent your child the way you want to, and the schools aren't in charge of your kids and so forth. But he did it more in, I would say, a traditional Republican tone, maybe actually angling a little toward being a bit more Democrat in the way he speaks. He's kind of backed away from some of that recently, but the way he got elected wasn't being Donald Trump. And he got the women to come out in droves and vote for him because they care about their kids. And DeSantis kind of has that mojo as well, whereas Trump just doesn't have that kind of appeal. And no matter how, you know, much they try to repackage him or say he's this or he's that, as you mentioned, Donald Trump's just going to shoot his mouth off. And as much as I
Hmm.
appreciate that, me personally, I don't have a big problem with that. I think it's good. It's refreshing. Our hero, kind of Ross Perot. Both of us have a lot of admiration for Ross Perot.
Right.
He said some bold, blunt things back in the '90s, which
Hmm.
perplexed both Bill Clinton and George H.W. Bush, and people were listening. People probably didn't even know if they were going to vote for the guy, but he was making sense. He was saying things that nobody else was saying. Trump does that, and he has that appeal, but his appeal tends to have a, I don't know, a limit or a plateau. And
Yes.
why didn't he? Now, again, you're going to have people that have huge problems with the 2020 election. YouTube doesn't like it when you talk about that stuff. So I'm going to kind of
Not at all.
veer away. But here's what I am going to say is that you have to move on at a certain
Hmm.
point. This is another thing Trump hasn't been able to do. If you know everybody in the Trump orbit, you know, Steve Bannon and all the people who really rile up the Trump base, they're still out there talking about this stuff. Kerry Lake won
Hmm.
Arizona, and we're going to prove it, and
Hmm.
we're going to prove it. Just like Trump won, okay, and we're going to prove it. And people have the Trump won T-shirts and so forth. I don't begrudge those people because I think they just feel as though the system is working against them, and this is another way to drive a wedge in there and to again gin up anger and frustration. And you look at the world and it's not fair, and woe is me. But yet, like this guy in Georgia, right, Kemp, who was not on Team Trump, he rolled to victory in Georgia. Rolled, beat
Right.
Stacey Abrams by a ton of votes. Everybody was worried, oh, she gets in there, that's the end of the state of Georgia. But yet, you know, the Trumpers supposedly didn't like Kemp because he took a phone call from Donald Trump, and Trump said, hey, you know, you got to find me a couple 100,000 votes or whatever. And Kemp's like, what are you talking about, dude? You know, and it, you know,
Yeah.
we saw some very interesting video footage from Georgia. All right. I'm not saying that some of those people were purer than the driven snow who were running elections down there, But why is it that Kemp was able, was it rigged for Kemp to win? So, I mean, there's a lot of things that don't make sense. Some of the non Trump Republicans who put together a platform, like Kemp was very good during COVID. He was good. He was opening things up and doing what governors should have been doing. And so people responded and they didn't link him and say, okay, well, is he with Trump? Because if he's with Trump, then I'm for him. All they
Right.
said was, I like what he's doing. I'm going to vote for him. And so this is kind of the problem with Team Trump is it's kind of their group. And if it's not their group, then, it's not the America First crew. And I like America First. I'm not saying I don't like that idea. It's just that branding, what does that mean? And is it just personality driven, Charles, or is it policy driven? For me, and this is why I get worried about the Trumpers sometimes, because it feels like a cult to me. It feels like we're going to see the rally because Donald's going to be there and he's going to say all these bombastic things, and then we're going to leave the rally and we're going to go home and sit on our couch and eat Doritos. It's like entertainment. Right. And I'm at the point, we get the war in Ukraine out of control. We got interest rates out of control, deficit out of control. All the things, by the way, that Ross Perot warned us about in the 90s. We go back and read Perot's book, and he had graphs that showed like the year 2020. And he missed it by like, I don't know, a couple $100. You know what I mean? It's that close. I mean, I'm not saying it's that close, but you know what I mean? You go back 30 years and you make predictions, and it's scary that he said, if we don't do X, Y, and Z, and by the way, he was right about China, right? And Trump's kind of right about China, but what did Trump really do? I mean, through a couple of tariffs down on them, but we still aren't making anything in this country, Charles. So if we start to like cut our ties with China, we're going to have a big shortage of a lot of products if we go ahead and, use that policy like out of the box, unless we do some kind of let's start making things in America again. And instead of sending billions of dollars to Ukraine, maybe we start to build up our own infrastructure. So to answer your question about your theory, I really think that second theory you have is spot on, because the Trump base, they're so enraged by this, and I kind of understand their rage, but it's kind of like a trap. It's kind of like J6. Yeah. Yes, let's go have this rally on the day where they're going to have the vote. What could happen? What could go wrong? Well, how about feds? How about a Fedsurrection, right? I empathize with those people, those J6 people who are in jail for Donald Trump. And he, by the way, he said, go to the Capitol peacefully or whatever. He didn't go. He didn't go to the Capitol. He went somewhere else. He went back to the White House. I don't know where he went, but and for Trumpers, look, I'm not trying to just slam Trump gratuitously, all right? But you got people in jail, and they're political prisoners, basically, and our country is blacked out. And it shows you how corrupt things are, and we need to end the corruption. I just don't know, if Trump is going to be the vehicle, and I can't persuade suburban women to love Donald Trump. I mean, it's not my job to do that. He's got to be convincing, empathetic. He's got to have good policies. And maybe if he didn't hang around with, what does he call her, horse face, Stormy Daniels? Maybe if he hadn't done that, I don't know. And look, you're right about Bill Clinton. My wife was saying that. It's a Bill Clinton in the Oval Office, man. And I'm like, yeah, I know. It doesn't make a lot of sense. But what say you, Charles?
Yeah, well, I mean, in Clinton's case, even before Monica, you had the I can't remember her name, but she was one of the ladies that Trump
Jennifer Flowers.
The what?
Jennifer Flowers.
That may have been one. There was one in particular though that I can't think of her name, but I remember when the whole Trump grab them by the came out, and when they went to the debate, he invited those women to be there that night.
Oh yeah. So that was pretty brilliant.
Yeah, but they were all, I think, like hush money payments also from the Clinton thing. So, but to your point, so here's the thing with Trump, okay, and I've been saying this for a very long time. Trump is a product of what our domestic policy has created
Yeah.
over the last 20, 30 years. Okay. And he capitalized on a group of people who felt abandoned. Okay. The jobs were gone. And the response they were getting from a lot of the people were learn to code.
Yeah.
Okay. And I can't speak for a lot of areas in the country. I will speak for where I've been majority of my life. I can tell you what I've witnessed and what I've seen around me. And I've talked about this in prior videos. There was a way of life here once upon a time. There are literally entire neighborhoods, and we call them, I don't know if like Georgia or North Carolina use this term, but I've always heard it in South Carolina growing up. And they call these neighborhoods mill hills. There's literally old cotton mills right in the center of these neighborhoods.
Yeah.
A long time ago, that was basically the work. You lived right there. You could walk to work. You didn't even have to buy a car necessarily. That's why a lot of them sometimes don't even have a driveway. And they're very close together, almost like New York housing, except it's one story, not two, but they're right there next to each other. And a lot of people lived in neighborhoods like that. Now, those mills went out of business
Oh yeah.
and really started going out of business as a result of what the man you just mentioned, Ross Perot. NAFTA came along and all these things went to Mexico and China.
Yep.
They left. And then these people were struggling to figure out what they were going to do for work. Now, working in those mills, that wasn't like you were going to be rich, but you made enough to have a decent life and you got by. And over time, the way of life just financial problems became worse and worse. The income inequality, which is a term that a lot of the leftists like to use, it has just grown and grown and grown as time went on. And we had 8 terrible years of George Bush. Okay. I don't think there are many people who would disagree with that.
You're
Bush
talking about
was,
George W. Bush, right?
yes, George
Yeah.
W. Bush. When Clinton was in office, even though he put a lot of things that in hindsight were not good into motion, uh, we still left with a surplus.
Yeah.
Okay.
You had,
And
you know
then
what you
Bush
had?
comes in. You know
Yeah.
what?
I'm just interrupt you for a second. You know what you had in the 90s? You had a Republican Congress and you had
Mm-hmm.
a Democrat executive branch, and
Mm-hmm.
they kind of got along. They kind of,
Exactly.
and Clinton did a pivot. Remember the end of the era of big government is over, and he
Right.
did. He made a pivot. Wasn't the most genuine. People can find fault with it, but the '90s were pretty good. They weren't horrible. People might have a different recollection of it. I don't. The '80s for me were great under Reagan, and the '90s weren't all that bad under Clinton. We had a little blip actually with George H.W. Bush, who drove inflation up and
Right.
got us into a war and did all
Yep.
the typical things that we've been seeing since after Bill Clinton, for the most part, when his son took over. But you're right. The George W. Bush years, in hindsight, were terrible, especially the last
Correct.
four, more
Yes.
so than the first couple. But really, once all of the war machine policies went into play, things things changed a lot. Anyway, go ahead,
Well,
Charles. Sorry.
and Obama came in, and he was supposed to be the symbol of hope for everybody. He was supposed to. I remember I was still fairly young at the time, but I remember even hearing things like he's going to be the next JFK.
Yeah, yeah.
That didn't age very
No,
well at all.
no.
Okay, and this guy comes in, and first of all, we don't get out of the wars. He didn't close Guantanamo Bay. He bailed out Wall Street.
Yep.
Okay, but to make things even better, you got where he's suspended habeas corpus.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
which My, how that has played out.
Yeah, and all
Basically,
these
on this war on terror, now that's being used against the J6 people.
Patriot Act and all, and that's, I
Oh,
mean,
yeah, yeah.
all of
Yeah, well,
this.
he
Yeah,
continued on every bit of that. Absolutely. And so, to my point, we went through 8 terrible years of George Bush. Then we get somebody that's supposed to be this beacon of hope, and we go through 8 years of him. And
yeah,
where
it
do
was
we end up?
Donald
You
Trump.
got nothing.
Yeah,
So Trump comes along, and he's speaking to a group of people who are, a group without a home, I guess, so to speak.
yeah,
Maybe a better way to describe it, but they're like refugees almost. They don't know where to go. It's like over here they're not doing anything. Over here they're not doing anything, and meanwhile we are suffering. Okay, and people when they start to just get fed up, some would say desperate, they turn towards something that looks
yeah.
like it could be changed.
Well, almost like a religion, Charles.
Correct. Which is what Trump represented. He was different.
Yep.
He was loud. He was brash. He just said what he thought, and they're like, "That's what we need."
Yeah.
They saw their inner frustrations inside of him. He was speaking out against a system that had seemingly been dumping on them for almost 2 decades. Okay, and they were sick and tired of it. And they're like, "This is what we need."
Yeah.
Now, evidence of that, I've seen people try to own the MAGA base when they go to these rallies and they'll ask them policy questions. I'm gonna let you in on a little something, okay? People inside of my family, on my mother's side, I've got a lot of people on that side of the family, like my grandfather, for example. He's a big FDR
Yeah.
guy, okay?
Wow.
He loved. I don't even. He wasn't even around when FDR was president. He just, or if he was at the tail end, maybe.
Yeah.
But he heard a lot of things through his father, the people who grew up during the Great Depression,
Right.
and they told stories. But this is what a lot of people refer to as Normans. If you sat down and asked him, what are 10 policies FDR actually put in place, he probably wouldn't be able to name very many.
Yeah.
See where I'm going with this?
Right.
So people think this is an own when they go to the Donald Trump rally, and they're like, okay, so that they'll say, well, Trump did everything he said he was going to do. Well, that's obviously not true.
Right.
But see, the normal folk who have to just go out and go to work and they come home and they're trying to live life, they don't get to just sit down and engage in all this policy watching. You know what I mean? I mean,
Yeah.
at times it's even difficult for me to try to keep up with some of these things with
Oh yeah.
everything I've got going on outside of work. So for the normal American person, they, even if they know what the policy is, do they understand it? All they know is this ain't working
Hmm.
and I'm suffering. Now, the
Right.
problem is Trump made a lot of big promises when he was going into office. He ginned up, he won a lot of those states because there were even Democrats who were sick and tired of what we're going on. So there were Democrats who flipped and voted for Trump, much like there were Democrats who flipped for Nixon and for Reagan.
Yeah.
It's happened in the past, okay? So this happened for Trump the first time around. When he ran in 2020, a lot of that shine had gone away.
Yeah.
Okay? A lot of that had just left the room because for this reason or for that, he didn't deliver on a lot of the things that he promised. Now, you could argue that's because they were trying to stop him at every turn. Some would argue he really didn't want those things. He just said it. It's neither here nor there. They didn't happen. Then, on top of it all, he was supposed to be the jobs president. Well, we got some jobs, but I think even Carrier, which was supposed to be his big claim to fame, even Carrier wound up still outsourcing jobs.
Yeah. I
Okay.
know where you're going.
So
Yeah.
it didn't play out the way it was pitched. The wall didn't get built. Okay. He was supposed to be this master negotiator. not to steal Nancy Pelosi's thunder because that was her time. But he was supposed to be this master negotiator. It just didn't pan out the way that it was supposed to. So a lot of that shine wore off. And then, as you brought up, the suburban women, okay, it got to the point where society just got worse and worse and worse. And I don't even think it was all Donald Trump's fault. There are plenty of fringe activists on the left side who
Oh, yeah.
just want to completely change the way we live our daily life. And but here's what happens. They both agitate each other.
Yeah.
You've got
Yeah.
the fringe of the left trying to push their agenda. Then you've got Donald Trump being the loose cannon and just leading the charge over here. And then there's just a clash.
Right.
And people, for the most part, the people who the suburban women, even a lot of the upper middle class in general,
Mhm.
a lot of them, if they were living some sort of a comfortable life, the idea of conflict like that, from my experience, they don't like it. They're like, oh my God, where could this go? They see chaos and they want to stay away from that. So you started hearing this a lot going into 2020. We want to go back to normalcy.
Yeah. Yeah.
You started hearing a lot of that. And the problem with that is what the normal that we went back to was the normal that gave us Donald Trump in the first place.
That's
And I
true.
said that going into the 2020 election. I said, if you take Donald Trump down and you replace him with a Joe Biden or a Kamala Harris, you are putting in the root problem that gave you Donald Trump in the first place.
That's right.
You're putting a band aid on a gunshot wound.
Yep.
The bleeding is not going to stop. The bullet still exists. It hasn't been treated. It hasn't been dressed properly. It hasn't even been sanitized. The only thing you're going to do is continue bleeding, continue to be hurt. Then you're going to develop infection, and it's
Yeah.
going to get even worse.
Yeah.
Okay? This is where we're going. We put Joe Biden and Kamala Harris in charge, and society is continuing to tear itself apart. There are people, the MAGA base, or even some actors on the left, who they're not seeing the needs addressed. So the people that they're like, some of these actors over here, they want to change society. They want to reinvent who can go in what bathroom. They want to change what the definition of a woman is.
Yeah.
They hear all these things and it's driving them up a wall. And it's nonstop in your face. It's
Hmm.
all over TV. It's
Yep.
in schools. It's in social media. It's everywhere you turn, and it's all up in your face. And one thing I've always seen is people tend to be weary of change, and they don't like it.
Right.
Okay, so now we're to the point that we're at right now. Donald Trump isn't going away.
No.
And the problem is for a lot of, now that it's gotten to this point, you've got the people who are just desperate. And I don't want to say that as an insult. They're just looking for change. The
Yeah.
America First MAGA crowd. They want something to change, even if you've got to come in with a sledgehammer to do it. They're like, something has to give. They want that change. But Trump lost some of those normal folk. Case in point, my mother-in-law has been a big Trump supporter since probably, she voted for him in 2016, but she really hopped on the bandwagon about midway into his term. Okay.
Yeah.
And she was a huge, supporter that he really won in 2020. She believes
Right.
that wholeheartedly. She
Yep.
says, no, that election was, well, I don't want to say it on YouTube and get us in trouble. But she was big into that idea. Okay. And as a result of that, she started coming up with these ideas, and I don't know, she heard them from somewhere. I don't know where. But she was insistent that in the midterm elections, that the Republicans were going to clean sweep everything.
Oh yeah,
And they
yeah.
were kind of on track to do that up until the court got crazy with Roe v. Wade, my opinion. But and regardless of what your stance is on that, and I'm not saying I completely agree with, like late term abortions and all that, but it's just overwhelmingly the country had a certain view, the majority had a certain view, and the court did not uphold that view, and so I think that hurt their numbers. But when that happened, obviously numbers tanked. The Republicans did win the House, but the Senate didn't really go anywhere. But she had this idea. She was telling me this back in 2021, Dave. She said, when they win, Donald Trump will become the Speaker of the House. And when they win and he becomes the Speaker of the House, they will then start an impeachment process on Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. See, this was the way he was going to get back to the White House.
Yeah.
They're going to impeach Biden. They're going to impeach Harris. They're going to remove them both from office. And then the speaker being third in line, Trump will be back to the White House. And she was dead set this was going to happen. And I told
Yeah.
her, I'm like, it's not going to happen. First
Right.
of all, Donald Trump's not going to do it.
Right. Correct.
He has an ego on him that I'm neither number one or I'm nothing at all.
Right.
And he don't want to be number three for
Nope.
sure.
Nope.
Okay. So I told her, I'm like, this is never going to happen. But she was just insistent. Yeah, it is. Watch. Okay, well, we know now it didn't happen.
Yeah.
But this is where, so to me, this speaks volumes to where the mind is going. There's groups out there who are looking for someone to change, and these ideas are just coming out of left field and all over the place. It speaks to where our society's at as a whole.
Yeah.
But even she has finally started to come around to a realization maybe his mouth isn't helping the cause very well.
Yeah.
And so now she is a full-fledged Ron DeSantis supporter.
Ron DeSantis, right.
She has been behind Ron DeSantis for probably at least the last 6 months or so.
Yeah.
Literally almost like right after the midterms, I started hearing her say more about how Trump just needs to go away. Let Ron DeSantis win.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's been this complete flip. Now that's kind of seesawing, and right now the two of them are going at each other's throats. But yeah, it's the suburban people. There's a growing group who are just wanting to get away from Donald Trump. They think that train has ran its course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it's kind of one of those things. It's a be careful what you wish for.
Right. Right.
Because people wanted someone to come in and shake up the system. And I agree with the reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, the system wasn't working. But the problem is, and this has been my one thing I've always want people talk about, we want a revolution. We want to just throw out the government and start anew. And my one caution has always been to people, be careful what you wish for, because you don't know what's going to come out of this mess.
Right.
You want to shake it up, but you don't know what's going to come out when you do. You start a revolution. Who gets the power when the revolution's over? What kind of people are they? They may have seemed to be one way, but power changes people. You know that we could point to things in history, and we could have this conversation for a much longer period of time. But I mean, Castro started off with the hope he was going to do one thing. Mao, people thought that was going to go one way. They thought that the Soviet Union with Lenin, but then we wound up with Stalin, right? So
yeah,
history shows things can change. You may start off with the intentions of one thing, but what do you end up with? And that's always been my caution. So people wanted someone to just come in and shake up the system. The person who we got to do that was Donald Trump. But what did we end up with? And now look where we're at today. Society's involved in even more chaos.
Yeah.
Neither side's doing very much to calm that down.
Nope.
And he's not going away, even if the Republicans do want to distance themselves from him. You can't put the toothpaste back in the tube.
Yeah. Yeah.
What's done is done, and he's here. And
Right.
so, unless, and I'm going to go ahead and say this too, if they get their way with a Ron DeSantis, I've said this before. I don't know if me and you have brought it up or not, but
Yeah.
unless you put Trump behind bars where he can't run, if Ron DeSantis runs and gets the nomination, Trump is going to run independent.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
He's going to run third party.
Yeah.
It's in his genes, man. He's got to go out swinging. He would,
And they'll
regardless of
want
what
it.
you think about 2020,
And
he
his
went out
supporters,
swinging on that.
yeah, his supporters will want that too, by the way. They'll say, all right,
Absolutely.
Donald, here's your opportunity. And there's a lot of people out there, Charles, that are, these two parties suck. You and I are, I think, we're in that camp
Yep.
um, to some degree. I mean, you look at what the two parties really are all about, and one fundraises off the other one. This culture war, I hate it because it's insane. Not
Yeah.
because I don't think people, this is why DeSantis and Glenn Youngkin and some other people did well, because they recognize that moms want to raise their kids. Don't mess with mama bears.
Yeah.
And not everybody is down with the rainbow, not
Mm-mm.
in its bright, super bright colors. I think a lot of people are like, okay, hey, yeah, you're of this persuasion, right? This was 20, 30 years ago. Everybody was like, hey, it's okay. You do you, right? You hear this all the time.
Exactly.
You're of the age of majority. We used to kind of look at 18. You're an adult. You want to pursue something, but now you got like, little kids being told things, and I'm like, no, this
Yeah.
is
It's becoming just an inch too far. And the thing about somebody like a Ron DeSantis, and I'm not endorsing him for president. I'm an independent. I would say if it came down to him or Joe Biden, I would take Ron DeSantis over Joe Biden.
okay. Yeah,
But I don't know that I would go out to necessarily vote for the guy, right?
their
But that
campaign.
being
Yeah,
said, his message, this is why people have started gravitating more towards somebody like that. They look at it, they're like, we want somebody that's gonna that stands for what we believe,
hmm,
but he's got the more traditional statesman approach at
yeah,
times.
yeah. That's a good
He's
point.
got just enough fire and just enough of that fight without coming across as too much, which Trump tends to do a lot.
Well, and you know what you're going to get back though, Charles, is people saying that's because he's part of the establishment. Ron DeSantis. This is what I'm
And
hearing.
George Soros likes him.
Yeah, the Tulsi Gabbard thing. She went to that.
Yes.
She didn't go to the event, and I had to keep, a DeSantis Gabbard ticket, by the way, would be really fun. It'd be really fun. I would be a little charged
Yeah.
up for that. But I'll give you some anecdotal evidence, being that I'm in Florida, is back maybe 6, 7 months ago, the Trump flags never went away. People had them on their property, waving in the wind,
Right.
the Trump signs, and it's still in force. But then all of a sudden, you started to see a little change happen where the DeSantis bumper stickers started to show up, and DeSantis signage, which is far less, in your face as far as the branding goes. And maybe, his team should, just so people can recognize it a little bit easier. But when I started to see, I said to my wife, I said, look, DeSantis signs, huh? I wonder
Mm-hmm.
if this is a signal. And I know I'm in Florida, right? So DeSantis won. This is another thing people have to take into account, including Donald Trump, who, by the way, has started calling. I don't know if you've heard this at the Trump rallies, but he's calling Ron DeSantis Ron DeSanctimonious.
Monius. Yeah.
Unreal. And by the way, the Trump rally, they had a couple of headlines on conservative ink channels, as I like to call them. Silence during this portion of Trump's presentation, as he calls. You could hear a pin drop while he's ramping up, making fun of, oh, well, he thinks he's this great guy, and Florida was great long before Ron DeSantis. I'm just like, dude, what are you talking about? I mean, yeah, what was it? Rick Scott was here, and Florida's been a pretty prosperous, decent place, and everybody comes here for the sunshine. They say in Florida, if you take a job, you're going to get partly paid in sunshine, because they're going to, some of the wages have come up. The housing market, pretty strong. I mean, it's expensive to buy a house. Interest rates are up. So you got to have some money to come here now. But the
Right.
point I'm trying to make is that I think there is a shift happening, and Trump media people like the Steve Bannons, who I tend to pay attention to because that's kind of like the tip of the spear when it comes to Trump Incorporated. They're all like, no, Trump's up by every poll. Trump's up by 30. He's up by 40. He's up by 50. This is going to help Trump. Like you said, this will push Trump. Your point is the, if anyone, takes away anything from our little talk here, is the point that you made about sort of the boomerang effect, which everybody is saying, oh, this is going to be horrible for the people who are going after Trump because now everybody's really mad. I'm mad because I think it's prosecutorial negligence or over whatever the term is. This is just stupid.
It's abusing the judicial system for ridiculous reasons.
So, but your point though is that this will be enough to get him to the nomination again, and they run. See, I'm thinking even though they're putting on a poker face, I think they're going to run Gavin Newsom for president. That's my prediction. And the reason I say that is because Biden he's falling upstairs, he's falling downstairs. He can't answer. I mean, they send him out. He delivers a speech where it's unintelligible. Then he walks away when reporters are asking him questions. Look. I mean, Gavin Newsom would be, I think, a nightmare for the country, bring California to the rest of the world. I don't know, but I think that's what I see. If it's not this election cycle, it's coming soon. And
no confidence in Marianne Williamson.
She came out. Don't get me going on a tangent. She came out in support of the war in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Marianne bleeping Williamson. Oh, peace and love and new age crystals and okay, I'm going to mention this in the video. Get your take on it since we're going off. We can take a break from Trump anyway, because I need a break. I totally need a break, Charles. I've been doing this for a very long time and getting very, very tired, okay? Although I have tons of energy. You ask everybody, I am charged up, ready to go. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., what do you think?
I heard this, and I would like to see it happen. I heard him say that he was considering it.
Tough to communicate, though. Tough to listen to him talk. And I'm not trying to be mean.
Right, but I internally thought that. My problem, he's got a very, not that I don't say that I agree with listening to him. I think he sounds like he's researched these topics very well. I've heard him in the debates, and he even said when this was questioned to him, when they were like, how do you see yourself justifying this? He's like, show me where I'm wrong.
Yep.
But his take on vaccines in a Democrat primary, that's going to be the biggest hill probably for him to climb. Now, it sounds like he's progressive on a lot of the other stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I would say between the communication thing, and again, I'm not saying that to be a jerk. If I had the choice of having a president with that versus anybody else that's out there right now, and the president had a good policy and they were going to do right by the country, I don't care if they had to speak in sign language. Yeah. Okay, if they had to have a translator with them.
Well, you got John Fetterman in the Senate. Come on.
Well, that's a good point. Okay, so, but yeah, I mean, to me, that's just, if I were to not vote for someone over that, even though they had really good policy, that to me, that's just a low book. Like, well, okay, this is what you care about,
right?
I care about the man's policy.
See, as far as the vaccine stuff, and I don't know, it's one of the reasons I would vote for. I'm sorry. I mean, there are a lot of people that don't agree with me to the level that I take it, and I have been very subdued because of the things you can and cannot say
exactly
on this particular platform and a few others maybe. But Facebook is ridiculous. I mean, they're going to fact check you and give you context, and there's a paragraph that they they have to paste in some information. Oh no, he got this from, naturalnews.com. That's heresy, So
Right.
but anyway, I
But
because he's such a fighter, I have his book. It's called The Real Anthony
yeah,
Fauci. I would recommend people read it because it's whether you agree with him or not, like he says, okay. And this would be a great Charles, you know why this wouldn't go anywhere? Because then the media would challenge him on things and he would present he'd have the receipts all over the place. Here's a receipt. You want to see? And they go, "Oh crap. This is going to come out, isn't it?" And then we're going to be
exactly.
held accountable for that. So they can't they're going to squat as you say if he runs as a Democrat, which he's been a lifelong Democrat. I can't see him not running as a Democrat, which kind of bothers me. But if he runs as an independent, he's an immediate spoiler. But
Yeah.
he does have the possibility of bringing in both Democrats and some Republicans who are very militant and vigilant on that one issue and maybe a couple other issues. I think he's probably going to be free speech, right? Robert F. Kennedy, old school free speecher. Those two issues, Charles, would be very attractive to me based on what the current media landscape and the current political landscape look like. And again, is he going to be able to overcome all of the air that Donald Trump sucks out of the atmosphere? Probably not. Probably not. In fact, Trump will make fun of him all day long, and it will be cruel and it'll be
Yeah.
ridiculous. And I'll hate that, by the way.
Well, let me throw two things out there because I know we're getting close on the time here. But one other thing, and I'm not saying this just to try to be funny because there's nothing funny about what I'm about to say. I'm saying this from a point of this is, oh, I legitimately have a concern here. If he runs for president based
Safety.
on
Safety.
that, yes, I would seriously be concerned for the man's safety and well being because we all have seen what has happened to the Kennedys over
Yeah.
the years.
Yeah.
And I know there's official narratives out there. I'm not so sure I believe them.
Yeah. I
For,
think.
for, for, for YouTube's sake, I'm going to leave it at that. But, JFK was pushing some pretty wild ideas. Not that they weren't necessarily good ideas, they were just, again, shaking up the system. Okay. He fired the head of the CIA.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Ironically enough, that's one of the people who Johnson appointed to the Warren
Of
Commission.
course.
Okay. But, he starts coming in and he makes all this noise and then he gets assassinated. And then
Yeah.
there's all sorts of things that go along with that. Then his brother, RFK's father,
Yeah.
runs for president, wins the California primary. There's the rumor behind the scenes is he's going to look into the JFK assassination again.
Yep.
If he gets elected, he gets assassinated.
And by the way, to add on to this, Nixon wanted to look. You know this. I'm sure you're an expert on this, but apparently Nixon wanted to look into this as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying that's the reason all the Watergate stuff happened, but it's very coincidental that he said we want to look into what happened with John, and they looked at him like he had two heads. Like no, you can't look into it. That was his political opponent, but he looked at the country. He said, "This is the difference, Charles, too, between the politicians of I don't know how many years ago. I don't know when this all became so just ridiculously tribal, where you didn't have the best interests of the country at heart. But Nixon's probably thinking, "Hey, if this happened, I'm gonna tell." And the same thing with Robert F. Kennedy, and and you're right. Your premise, and a reporter did ask him. I don't know if you saw that, where they asked him, "What about your safety?" And he said, and he looked right straight at him. He says, "I don't care. I'm not
Yep.
worried about my safety." So that would
Which I
be
mean, kudos to him. But
yeah,
um, one other point that I will throw out there because, and I don't want to have to go back to this again, but I did want to point this out earlier because it's something me and you were going into. If Teflon Don does run third party, I had a discussion with a good friend of mine that I've known for years. He's a member of my lodge, and We were actually coming back from a funeral one day, and we were talking about what me and you were talking about with the Ron DeSantis Trump thing, and I pointed out, I said, what I said to you, I said, if Ron DeSantis wins, Trump will go third party. And he's been a big MAGA guy. He's been a Trump supporter ever since 2016.
Yep.
And as soon as I said that, he looked dead at me and he said, and you know what? If he does, I'll vote for him.
And he'll lose.
He'll lose. And so would Ron DeSantis.
So would Ron DeSantis, right?
Because that chunk is going to follow him wherever he goes.
Correct.
You see where I'm so.
Oh, yeah.
But I still think there's enough fear on their side that I think what me and you pointed out at the beginning of this, that's probably, I said 50-50 of it. That's probably the direction I'm leaning in. I think they think that the damage has been done. If we get Trump past the 50-yard line, we'll be able to get the ball back and score in the other direction.
Right.
And we'll beat him in the general.
Right.
So I do think that's really what the crux of all this is coming down to. I think it's using our judicial system as political theater to gin up people. It's only going to cause more problems, more chaos, but they don't care. These politicians have made it very clear for years that the concern of the people is not a concern of theirs. Okay, 100%. It's all about winning elections and how they're going to pad their pockets more and what they can do for the donors. But
yeah,
that's where I'm at on that. But on another note, me and you may have to do a video on this one day. But I would be very curious if RFK Jr. runs for president, and I will say this: if he runs, I said that I would never vote for a Democrat again.
Me too.
I may have to, eat those words.
Yeah.
If he ran in the primary,
right,
I would go out and vote for him.
Yeah, I'm an independent right now, so I'd have to, again, I did this for Tulsi Gabbard too. I'd have to go out and register as a Democrat. What I do though, Charles, is I have this really high.
So bad, Dave.
What's that?
State's so bad. Your state's so bad. I don't have to register to a party. That's one good thing about South Carolina. I just have to be registered to vote.
Right. That is good. I'm not going to say it's not good, but
a political party.
I had to take a shower though after I registered as a Democrat. I had to hose down. Yeah, I don't know if you've seen the scene in what was it, Pet Detective, where Jim Carrey ends up kissing the wrong person. And then he goes into the shower, he lights everything on fire, burns it all. That would be me, all right? I'm just saying that would be me. But see, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., again, the two things I want to touch on here before we wrap up is he will go through hell in that primary. He will go, remember, and I didn't even like that Bernie that much, but right, Bernie was the guy who wasn't talking exactly like everybody else. Put it that way, all right? Whether you like Bernie Sanders or not, I'm talking a little bit different. I'm thinking maybe the war is not a good idea. And now, of course, I love war. It's great. Anyway, I don't know who's better, Bernie or Trump. But the point is that he will go through hell in that primary. Yeah. You're not for endless war. You're not for the medical industrial complex. You're pushing back against that. You have, and he'll be grilled. And like you said, or he said, hey, where am I wrong? And then that opens up a can of worms. Maybe they won't ask him a whole bunch of questions about that, right? But then they'll ask, other questions. And he's, again, he's going against the sitting president if Biden runs again. I mean, it's going to be all of this nonsense and BS. So talk about political theater. And you want to see people come out of the woodwork, right, for somebody who's being unjustly taken to task on things. And look at what's happening with Trump. And this would be times 10 for a group of people. Now, I don't know if there are enough people, Charles. That's the problem, because a lot of people didn't follow the real Anthony Fauci. They didn't follow some of the other, we'll call it the other science that's available on certain topics. They didn't follow that. They just followed what the CDC told them to do. So for me, that would be really tough. I would say, you know what, I'm going to I'm going to have to register as a Democrat to at least vote for him in the primary, right?
Right.
And then have all the money come in for Biden or Gavin Newsom or whoever the anointed person is. I don't think it's going to be Kamala Harris, though.
Right.
I don't think it's going to
So
be. Go
one
ahead.
one
We
thing
got
that
to
I
wrap
would
up pretty soon here.
that I'll throw out here real quick, because this is, I'm trying to remember. Maybe you remember this. How long do they give them to speak in those presidential debates when they get to respond? It's what, like 2 minutes, three
Couple of
minutes?
minutes, yeah, a couple of minutes, and then
So here's what my prediction is going to be if he runs. Okay.
he's going to have trouble speaking.
Well, I'm not going to hit his speech.
Yeah.
This has been, even Bernie Sanders has pointed this out as a problem with the way the debates run. You take complex topics and expect someone to explain
Soundbite.
a lot of details in soundbite time.
Right.
And so here's what's going to happen. When they start to really drill into it on something like that, he's got all this information. And it's not going to be possible for him to just pump it out there in a quick little soundbited time frame. And then you're going to have some moderator like Anderson Cooper cutting him off like, okay, time's up, time's up. No, you let them speak now.
Yeah.
That's how that would be my prediction on how they stick it to him. And the problem with that is, if you gave him the amount of time to explain his case, I think he would convince a lot of people. I think he would win a lot of people over. But they're going to use that against him. The next thing is then whatever gets said in the debates, then they're going to do the usual. They're going to deceptively edit. They're going to soundbite this. They're going to soundbite that. They're going to play it to the people who didn't sit through the debate, and then they're going to create the straw man argument. And we've seen the playbook. But no, if he runs, I would definitely have to go out and give him my vote in the primary.
Yeah. Well, and on that note, Charles, maybe we have a little hope, maybe something to look forward to doing for a while before we get to the ridiculous horse race that, is going to happen at some point. And again, my advice to everybody is get involved in your local stuff, your school board, your dog catcher, your county commissioner, who's got the purse in your county and what are they doing with that purse, and how are those funds being allocated? That's what you need to focus on. Because at the federal level right now, it feels like it's so out of control and stupid, and nobody seems to answer any of these difficult questions. The Republicans are out there holding hearings every day. Well, great, but is that going to change anything? You're going to hold some people accountable. Those people going to get fired? Probably not. Are they going to quit? Are they going to feel shame? Who knows, Charles? But the point is, you got to stay local. You got to decentralize, and you just have to stay vigilant. Kind of like you, Charles, the vigilant man.
I appreciate that.
And thanks for by the way, thanks for doing this. I know you got a lot going on. You haven't been doing as many. Are you doing any videos again? Have you put up some videos that we can go watch?
Well, see, that's the interesting part. So yeah, if anyone wants to come over to the channel, you can find me YouTube, Lone Wolf Ace. I'm also on Rockfin and Rumble, but I haven't been posting very much lately. And as I told Dave, unfortunately, I've been needing to replace my laptop for some time. It's been just getting worse and worse, getting very slow. I've tried cleaning it out.
Yeah.
But as of this morning, like I said when we started this, it played the April Fool's joke on me and just decided that it was done for good. Yeah. So until I get some new equipment, I'm not going to be able to put the rest of this back to work right now. So.
Well, all right, man. Well, listen, you're welcome on the show. We got more to talk about. If this RFK thing goes anywhere, we got a lot to talk about there. Plus the Trump ruling will come in at some point, and we'll see. And then, of course, DeSantis hasn't even officially announced yet although
Right.
he's said pretty much everything indicating that he's going to run. So that's going to be interesting too. And,
But
the
Nikki
world,
Haley has.
what's that? Nikki Haley.
But Nikki Haley has.
Wow, I'm so excited. Hey, she's from your state. You're so proud, aren't you?
I've never been happier, Dave.
Nikki Haley. Oh, it's like
You,
John Bolton in a dress. Yes.
you'll appreciate this because you're a good classic rock guy.
I am
There's
kind of.
that old song, "You don't know what you got till it's gone."
Don't know what you got till it's gone. Huh.
I'm happy to be missing that. If you want to know the truth, South Carolina improved much better with McMaster as the governor than it did with Nikki Haley as the
Yeah.
governor.
Mrs. Neo con artist. Yeah, she's just a piece of work. But hey, she's a woman, Charles. We got to support our women. She's John Bolton in heels, so we gotta give her some. Charles Anderson, thank
that
you.
was an image I never wanted in my head.
There you go. Awesome. For the rest of your weekend now, you're going to have that stuck. April Fools, everybody. Me and Charles, we're only kidding. We're just kidding about No, this is a serious video. Thanks for being here, Charles, and I look forward to hanging out with you again.
Yes, sir. Thank you for having me on again, Dave.
All right.